Good morning and welcome to the North Chapel. Thank you for being here. I'm Bob Williamson, today's service coordinator. It's March 2nd, 1 month since Groundhog Day. 2 more weeks of winter, according to that rodent. But then this is Vermont. We know we're likely to see snow on into April and maybe beyond. But we're not done. Your being here proves that. So, Groundhog Day, good movie, fun festival. But Puxatawny Phil, just another shady character. Check out the many announcements in today's order of service. Taylor Barnes is here. Taylor, right down here in the front row. He'll be doing spiritual coordination with his whole family. And welcome to visitors and new folks. If any of you would like to stand and share your name and to say where you're from, we'd love it. I shared a story the last time I was up here in December. I was in the LA airport and I saw a young mom with a t-shirt that said Vermont on it. I said, oh, what part of Vermont are you from? Oh, we're not from Vermont, we're from Ohio, but we go there a lot. We love Vermont. In fact, we want to go to the Unitarian Church in Woodstock. It looks pretty amazing. I thought, really? So we just hit it up. But if you want to share where you're from and who you are, that would be great. Yeah. And that's okay if, yeah. How about it? Cool. Very cool. Welcome.
And it's your dad's birthday.
How about it? Happy birthday. You want to go?
My name is Susan. I'm from Fall River, Massachusetts, and I'm a faithful UU in Fall River, so I'm happy to be here.
Terrific. Good for you. Good for you. Another one?
We are Rick and Julie Pope. We're from Oxford, Connecticut. And this is the second time we've been here, actually. And we so appreciate the Unitarian Church here. And we're visiting our wonderful niece, Hope.
How about it? Great. Great. Thank you. I have one announcement too, a repeat from my last time up here in early December. If you're at all interested in being a service coordinator, please contact Mary Blanton. She'd really appreciate it. She would really appreciate it. As you can see, anyone can do this. Even this Geico insurance caveman reject. We'll see how this goes. I'm always challenged by technology. As I said, I'm a caveman. Smoke signals are my social media. Are there any other announcements? Soup, yeah. Ken Woodhead, God bless him, is downstairs making soup for us today. One vegetarian and one not. There's cornbread, so please come. There's plenty for folks to share. The whimsical cover on today's order of service combines many of my passions: waves, chocolate chip cookies, humor, and iconic art. It's a send-up of Hokusai's famous picture, The Great Wave off Kanagawa, one of the most reproduced works of art in modern culture. It's one of Hokusai's 36 views of Mount Fuji. The sacred mountain is off in the distance, echoed by a smaller wave in the foreground. I saw the original in Chicago recently and was surprised at how small it was, especially given its impact on our time. For me, this satirical version is the sincerest form of flattery and no way diminishes the power of the original. Years ago, I read a story in one of my surfing magazines. The writer said his girlfriend asked him what he talked about with other guys out in the water waiting for waves. "We don't talk," he said. We're all there for the same thing. We're competing for good waves. Chatting them up would soften the edge we need to get what we came for." I hope his girlfriend threw him a withering look and that he felt a bit ashamed. He's right, though. There's unspoken aggression in the water, a pecking order, and locals don't cotton to outsiders. Show respect for them and wait your turn. It's common courtesy. That said, I remember a line from Chief Seattle's letter to the Great White Father in Washington, D.C. "Who owns the sparkle on the water?" he wrote. Indeed, who owns the sparkle on the water? If more people surf for the right reason and carried the stoke, the joy with them in their lives, the world would be a better place. I remember a time in the Azores 10 years ago, a moment of graciousness I want to hold on to for the rest of my life. The day before, I watched guys snag bombs at Praia Victoria, Victory Beach, 10 to 12-foot tubes like a Portuguese pipeline. Even bodyboarders scored amazing rides, rocketing up the lip and then going airborne, doing a 360 and screaming down the face for more. I didn't go out. The sandy beach was only about 20 yards long with a minefield of big rocks everywhere. I didn't know the break, plus those waves were beyond me at age 65, but they were seared in my memory. I went back the next day, and the waves were more my size, 5 to 6 feet. I chatted up a guy out in the lineup. Desculpe, senor, no fado português. Excuse me, sir, I don't speak Portuguese. Fado inglês? Do you speak English? Yes, a little, he replied. Were you here yesterday? His eyes lit up and he said, Yesterday, just over there. It was Vietnam on fire. We both smiled, instantly linked by a deep love of the ocean and its many gifts. Impossible? If white jazzman Dave Brubeck could, in his song The Duke, summon the spirit, swagger, and swing of black jazz giant Duke Ellington, why couldn't a Vermonter make a crazy connection with an Azorean, all in the North Atlantic? Strangers no more, we were brothers of another mother, the sea. A nice wave drew near us. That's yours, I said to him. No, senor, it's yours. He lived here, but he was giving me the gift of a wave. I spun around and caught it, far from epic, but graced by his generosity. Someday I'll pay that gift forward to another. There's too much aggression in the water with guys claiming waves with threats of fists. We need more graciousness in the world, the true spirit of aloha. Chat up the guy next to you in the water or on dry land. You never know what you have in common. My epiphany from the Azores. Have a great week.
The night was like a lovely tune. Beware, my foolish heart. How white the ever-constant moon. Take care, my foolish heart. There's a line between love and fascination, and it's hard to see on an evening such as this. For they both give the very same sensation when you're lost in the magic of a kiss. Her lips were much too close to mine. Beware, my foolish heart, for if our tender lips combine, then let the fire start. For this time it isn't fascination, or a dream that will fade and fall apart. It's love this time. It's love, my foolish heart. Are you ready to be foolish? Are you ready to be foolish for love? Or for money? Are you willing to be foolish in the name of the holy? Would you dare? Or more powerfully, how could you dare not being foolish? Aaron Stockwell Weissman, who serves at our sister church in Framingham, shared a statistic with our ministers group about 10 days ago, and it has stayed with me. We were talking about this in the board meeting recently. We were talking about the challenge of growing a church. This church of wood and stone, but also this church of blood and bone. Especially against the challenges that we face these days. He shared that he had read through a church study that showed that 85% of people who go to a church for the first time go because they have been invited by a good friend. And he also shared that the average Unitarian Universalist invites a new person to church once every 26 years. How ready are we to grow? I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking the same thing that my sister thinks when asked questions like this. You might be thinking, like I think sometimes, that there's no such thing as the average Unitarian Universalist. In other words, you might be strategizing about a way to avoid the challenge of this question. And if you are, I understand, and I don't blame you. I don't blame my sister, and I don't blame myself. But it's worth reflecting on why this might be the case. It's worth talking about because it's not the numbers that really matter, because it is the inner growth that matters exquisitely. So I dare you. I dare those of you who might be closeted UU evangelists. I challenge you to deepen your faith, to talk about what that means. Even if it means looking foolish sometimes, and even if it means feeling foolish sometimes, and even if it means being foolish for the rest of your lives. Dear ones, I truly dare you, and I truly dare myself. Are we ready? Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. Today is Sunday, March the 2nd. And this morning's reflection is on the current state of our spiritual readiness. Politically speaking, a state of readiness is the degree to which military forces are prepared for the waging of war. What does a state of readiness mean on a spiritual level? How ready are we for the waging of peace? So welcome everyone, all souls, no exceptions, dreamers and spiritual seekers, soft-spoken ones, outspoken ones, lucky streak gamblers, lonesome losers beaten by the Queen of Hearts every time. Welcome to the bold and to the bashful, the wanderers and the worshipers, to the beautiful ones among us and to the broken ones among us, who of course are one and the same. Blissfully imperfect, one and all, blessed and beloved, given in care and compassion for one another, soul level deep, in good times and in tempest, in conflict and in consensus. We are held whole and honored by a love that knows no bounds. Let no single heart from out the whole be gone from us. Not gone. To all souls, I say good morning. It is good to be together. In the run-up to the war in Iraq, and after the traumas of September 11th in 2001, I made a fool of myself in the Raleigh-Durham airport in North Carolina. I was on my way somewhere with my backpack over my left shoulder and a guitar in my right hand. I walked down the large hallway that was straight as an arrow to the end of the terminal, which was a large circular room with 5 separate gates or so, a sit-down restaurant, a fast food place, and there were restrooms immediately to my right. So I turned toward them. They were clearly marked with signs above the gender-specific signs above the doors. From the looks of the airport, I was confident that the bathrooms would be clean and well cared for. I had plenty of time before my flight was scheduled to leave, so I decided to take advantage of the opportunity. I turned toward the well-marked bathrooms, and as I did, I saw a soldier in fatigues. A woman soldier in tan camouflage with combat boots, leaning with her back against the wall beneath the women's bathroom sign. One boot on the ground and one boot resting on the wall behind her. I frowned and I turned away. In frustration and in fear and in anxiety. I was terrified of the possibility of war, of crisis, and of conflict, bless you. I wanted to return to a more peaceful time, but I had frowned at her and I had turned away from her. And she saw me do it, our eyes had met, and she saw me turn away. So I felt awful about that, and I didn't know what to do. So I put down my guitar, and I took off my backpack and I laid it down next to my instrument, and I assumed the same position as the woman in fatigues, from whom I had turned away, leaning my back against the wall, beneath the men's bathroom sign, one boot down, one boot resting on the wall behind me. And I looked over to her as if to say, I'm sorry. And as if to say, thank you for your service. And as if to say, I hope that you see me and I see you. I wanted to believe in what we were doing, politically and diplomatically and militarily, and I did not. But I didn't want to take out my disbelief on an honorable woman. So I imagined being that woman, whoever she was. I let myself dream, and I tried to imagine having a different perspective, or having a solution in my daydreaming. And then I wrote a song about it. I wrote, I want to fight the wars of guns and bad ideas with the one hand over my heart. I want to fight the wars for the ones that I hold dear, defend the glory for the brave and living free. I want to free this war of oil and masquerade as a welcomed liberator. And I want to be this war, but the cause has been unmade, and now the story needs a reason to truly be. Oh, I tried to say that I true believed that deep in my heart I'd had an answer. I tried to imagine the lives of those who had come before. I tried to imagine what it was like in other times, in other conflicts. And then I wrote, I tried to kill the war in 1945 by bombing Hiroshima. And I tried to kill a war, but I nearly burned the sky by ignoring different ways of living free. I thought I'd win the wars of northern Vietnam and Negro subjugation. And I thought I'd spin the war as Little Martin's false alarm by killing glory when free at last was living free. And then I thought about my friend Chris Bice and what he faced in Tennessee. Reverend Chris Bice is my Unitarian Universalist colleague who serves in the suburbs outside of Knoxville. Chris serves at the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. He was there when the violence happened. I wrote, I tried to wage a war on liberal heart ideals, but there was no fear in the valley. I tried to stage a war in suburban killing fields with the gunshots in Tennessee on Sunday morning. Because there had been a connective tissue that binds us all together, all of us, everyone, no exceptions. Reverend Chris Bice was there in 2008 when 200 people had gathered in the church, there to see a children's performance of a musical, Annie. Chris was there when Greg McHenry, a longtime member of the church, deliberately put his body in front of a violent, armed, and unstable man who had entered the building with an intent to kill. So angry was he, as he wrote in his manifesto, at the liberals and the Democrats and the African Americans and the homosexuals. Greg McKendry stood in front of an angry gunman to protect the children. He gave his life in that effort, and he successfully defended the kids. But he could not defend a 61-year-old woman named Linda Krager. Linda was a member of the West Side Unitarian Universalist Church in the neighboring town of Farragut. She later died that evening from wounds that she'd received during the attack. The shooter was stopped when church members, John Bosted, Robert Birdwell, Arthur Bolds, Terry Usselton, along with a visitor named Jamie Parkey, restrained the man. What courage. What strength of heart. They were ready, and they were unafraid. I imagined being him. I imagined being the shooter. And it broke my heart. And I wrote, I tried to wage a war on liberal heart ideals, but there was no fear in the valley. I tried to stage a war in suburban killing fields with the gunshots in Tennessee on Sunday morning. Oh, when will we learn to end the wars of guns and bad ideas with the one hand over our heart? And when will we end the war for the ones that we hold dear, defend the glory for the brave and living free? Oh, if in my heart I do not yield, then we shall overcome someday. In the run-up to the war after 9/11, I made a fool of myself in an airport in North Carolina, but it taught me something that I will never forget. And I've reflected on that moment, turning it over and over again in my mind until I finally wrote a song about it. And I called it True Believer, and I almost wrote the song for me. Which is to say that I tried to write the song for the part of me that lives in that woman, whoever she was. I could have been that woman in a different world, in a different life, in a very different universe. So years later, in 2012 or so, I toured Mississippi and Alabama. I took the Civil Rights Legacy Tour that was sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Association. And Chris Bice was on that trip. Chris Bice was the minister at Tennessee Valley. And Mitra Jafarzadeh was on that trip. Mitra was the minister from the West Side Unitarian Universalist Church in Farragut. And Reverend Wendy was on that trip as well. Reverend Wendy, who served as an interim here in Woodstock. And I got to share the song with them back then. I don't know how it was for them to deal with what they were feeling, or how it was to minister to a congregation who was going through such an awful crisis. The size of their fear and their anxiety, the shape of their wound and injury, what a monster, what a colossus. What a giant thing that must have been, and continues to be, probably. How do we prepare for that? How do we get ready for such a thing? Because ready or not, here they come. In life, giant things rain down on us. How do we plan? How can we organize for this? I don't know, but I do have a foolish idea. The foolish idea starts with the story of David and Goliath. Do you remember the story of David and Goliath from the Bible? Recalling it quickly in words from a good storyteller who recited the story of Davy and Goliath in 60 seconds or less. I love these things you can find online. He says, in 1 Samuel 17, the Israelites were at war with the Palestinians. And there was a great giant named Goliath who stood over 9 feet tall. Every day, Goliath challenges the Israelites to a fight to the death, and of course, absolutely no one dares to fight him. But then a young boy named David comes along. He was a shepherd, and he had no business fighting Goliath. And yet he decides to step up to the plate. King Saul, who was the ruler over Israel at the time, the king completely doubted that David could go toe-to-toe with Goliath. But David insisted, faithfully saying, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine." Goliath sees David approaching him with only a slingshot, and he tries to belittle David, but David declares, "You come to me with a sword and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." And then he takes his slingshot and he slings a stone and he knocks Goliath to the ground, killing him with a single blow. And then David beheads Goliath. I didn't know that part in the story. And he surrenders the body to the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth. David's faith and his courage shows us that no obstacle is too great when God is with us. End of story. Was David foolish to challenge Goliath? It's a real question. Was Goliath a different kind of fool in his bombast and his arrogance? Have you ever felt like David, or wanted to be David, with courage enough to slay the giant? And have you ever been the giant? Have you ever been Goliath? Meaning, does some kind of giant live within us, making us afraid, making us shy away from being bolder with the force of deepest compassion? So my foolish idea starts with the story of David and Goliath, but it ends with the story of Jason Bourne. Do you know the Jason Bourne movies? Not everyone does, but many of us do. The Jason Bourne movies are based on a series of books by Robert Ludlum that were written in the 1980s. In short, Jason Bourne is a spy. He's a covert government operative, an assassin who gets shot and gets amnesia and can't remember who he is. As he slowly remembers, he has great regrets. He can't face what he has done. So I could have been more traditional, but I fear I may have failed you. I could have been more traditional. I could have stayed more in my lane, and I could have said religious words and then been on my way, but I did not. I respectfully stood before the Senate, and I talked about Jason Bourne. Why? Either because I'm foolish or because the holy is all around us. So I have a confession to make. You should know about it. I think that I may have made a fool of myself at the State House this week. I was honored to offer a devotional before the Senate in Montpelier. At the beginning of the afternoon meeting during the legislative sessions, faith leaders from across the state of Vermont are invited to offer words before Congress. The House of Representatives has their session, the Senate has their session, and sometimes there's a joint session of Congress. I was invited by Senator Clarkson to speak in the Senate chamber. It's a beautiful and friendly and daunting and respectful and gracious and fierce and honest place. Those were the feelings that were in the room. I didn't really know what to say because there's so much to say these days. And also because my role in that moment is not to be political, but to be faithful. So I decided to be honest, and I decided to talk about what it means to be faithful in the face of the Goliath within. I tried to share what was in my heart, and I'd like to share with you what I said. Good morning, beloveds. My name is Reverend Dr. Leon Dunkley, and for 8 years now, I have been honored to serve as minister at North Universalist Chapel Society, or North Chapel in Woodstock, Vermont. It's an honor to be with you all today. My words of blessing are few. They are about finding hope in an unlikely place. My words are few, but they require some context, some weird context. I admit. I have reasons for this. I look forward to sharing my words with you, but for just a moment, I beg your indulgence. I would like to begin by thanking you for your public service. Who we are as a people depends so very much on how we are as a people. Thank you for stewarding to the best of your gift the health and vitality of our brave little state. I wish that I believed that my words would be magical. They are not, save in their ability to remind us, myself included, of the best within us becoming possible, against the odds and against the grain, prisoners of hope, one and all. I helped to lead a retreat a few months ago. It was a retreat that I was co-leading with several indigenous wisdom keepers, elders from northern New England. As a second career minister from central New Jersey, I felt myself profoundly underqualified. Of course, I was treated respectfully until I shared with them that one of the people that I most admired was an imaginary hero named Jason Bourne. Not Matt Damon, the actor who plays this fictional character in a series of movies, and not Robert Ludlum, the author who dreamed up the character in the first place. I admire the imaginary hero that lives within me and that lives within us, perhaps, because of Matt Damon and because of Robert Ludlum. I admire the imaginary Jason Bourne. As you may know, the movies that I'm talking about are action movies. There's a lot of running down alleyways and racing around in cars. There's a lot of gunplay, boy energy, and lots of things explode. These are mainstream American films. Needless to say, the wisdom keepers, the elders, were, shall we say, concerned. Until I was able to share that the reason that I think that Jason Bourne is heroic is conveyed in a 3-minute passage at the end of the second of the 5 action films. When the hero understands, accepts, is honest about, and takes responsibility for the pain and the suffering that he has caused. None of the running and racing around matters. None of the gunplay explosions matter. In the 10 hours of American popular film, those 3 minutes are the only minutes that matter. And although it might seem wasteful, those 3 minutes never fail to fill me with hope. Hope in the power of self-acceptance, forgiveness, and the peaceful choice moving forward. In 1963, Martin Luther King talked about a new sense of faith that was growing in American life. He said, "With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. And that with this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, and to struggle together." So my words of blessing are only these. Be wise and brave, your own soul to save, and your message engraved in gold. I'll saddle up in the meantime and make my way closer to you. I'm going to pack up my sorrows, throw down my guns, and give up the best of my heart. May we learn to meet again in hope, in this, our young and beautifully heroic American dream. Deep in my heart, I truly believed that we shall overcome, that we have overcome, that we are overcoming the giants that stand in the way of grace, the giants that stand in the path of peace, the giants that make us feel fearful of risking foolishness. Foolishness is worth the risk, for beyond that fear lies a love that holds us all. There's a line between love and fascination, and it's hard to see on an evening such as this, but they both give the very same sensation when you're lost in the magic of a kiss. Her lips were much too close to mine. Beware my foolish heart, for if our tender lips combine, then let the fire start, for this time It isn't fascination or a dream that will fade and fall apart. It's love this time. This time it's love, my foolish heart. In popular song and in popular film, in the Bible, and in the words of its faithful prophets like Martin Luther King and others, beautiful possibility is everywhere around us if we are willing, if we are daring, and if we are foolish enough to reach for it, to nurture it, and to grow it in our souls. Are you ready? Maybe so. Blessed be, and amen.